They dared me $20,000 to sleep with Sarah Feliz, the Ice Queen boss who could end careers with one signature. But Sterling didn't know I'd been married to her for exactly 1 year. When he made that bet in the site trailer on our anniversary, I knew we finally had the evidence we needed to destroy him. I walked into her office that night and said the words we'd been rehearsing for months. We got him. Before we continue, please tell us where in the world you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel, and it proves that powerful stories resonate everywhere. Sterling made the offer on a Friday afternoon in the site trailer. He wanted me to seduce Sarah Feliz for $20,000. I was a lead site inspector, and Sarah was the VP of development at Morrison & Hale Construction. Sterling thought I was just another struggling contractor with a daughter to feed. He had no idea Sarah and I had been married for exactly 1 year. I accepted the bet immediately. Sterling recorded me on his phone saying I would sleep with Sarah Feliz before my contract ended in 2 weeks. He thought he was setting a trap for me. He planned to report me to HR for sexual harassment and get me fired. That was Sterling's game. He targeted contractors, got them to violate company policy, then reported them to look like a hero. He'd already gotten 4 people fired that way. What Sterling didn't know was that Sarah and I had been waiting for him to make exactly this kind of move. We'd suspected he was corrupt for months. We'd been documenting everything. And now he'd finally given us the evidence we needed. After Sterling left the trailer, I sent Sarah a text message telling her it happened. She replied with 1 word. Finally. I finished my inspection reports, went home to check on my daughter Emma, then drove to Sarah's office downtown. The executive floor was mostly empty when I arrived at 7 p.m. I knocked on Sarah's door twice, our private signal, and she told me to come in. She was standing by the window, in her black suit with the red blazer I loved. The moment I closed and locked the door, she dropped the Ice Queen act and kissed me. We'd been hiding our marriage for a year. It was exhausting. Sarah had to pretend I was just another contractor. I had to call her Ms. Feliz in front of everyone. We drove separate cars to work. We never touched in public. We couldn't even eat lunch together. All because of company policy about contractors and executives having relationships. But we'd followed the rules. We disclosed our marriage to the legal department 6 months earlier. We'd filed all the paperwork. The company knew we were married. They just asked us to keep it quiet until my contract ended. In 12 more days, we could finally stop pretending. I played Sterling's recording for Sarah. We sat on her office couch and listened to him offer me money to seduce my own wife. When it finished, Sarah was quiet for a long time. Then she said, $20,000. He really thinks you're that desperate. I explained that Sterling assumed I was just a poor contractor. He didn't know I had a wife who made 3 times my salary. He thought I needed his money badly enough to risk everything. Sarah opened her laptop, and I sent her the audio file. She forwarded it immediately to Linda in HR and to the company's legal team. We already had months of documentation about Sterling's behavior. He'd targeted other contractors with similar schemes. He'd made inappropriate bets about female executives. He'd created a hostile work environment. This recording was the final piece of evidence we needed. Sarah told me that Linda and HR already had our marriage certificate on file, along with the conflict of interest disclosure we'd submitted in January. The recording proved Sterling was trying to engineer a policy violation for his own benefit. Combined with the other complaints we documented, it would be enough to get him fired. I asked Sarah if she was sure we should destroy Sterling's career. She reminded me about the 4 contractors he'd already gotten fired. Good people who'd lost their jobs because they refused his bets or fell for his traps. We weren't going to let him hurt anyone else. Sarah sent all the documentation to HR. She said Linda would see it Monday morning, and we'd probably get called into a meeting by Tuesday. In 2 weeks, my contract would end, and we could finally stop hiding our marriage. We stayed in Sarah's office until 9 p.m., eating Thai food and reviewing all the evidence we collected against Sterling. We had dates, recordings, and witness statements from other contractors he'd approached. Sterling had made one critical mistake. He'd assumed I was just another vulnerable contractor. He never considered that I might be married to the one person in the company who could destroy him. I told Sarah that our daughter Emma wanted to change her emergency contact at school to list Sarah instead of me. Emma had started calling Sarah Mom 6 months earlier. It was Emma's choice. Sarah never pushed it. Emma's biological mother had died when Emma was 6, and she'd been hesitant about me dating anyone, but she loved Sarah immediately. Sarah cried when I told her about the emergency contact form. She said she'd been pretending to be the ice queen for so long, the woman who never smiled in meetings, who lived alone in a downtown condo, while her actual husband and daughter lived 3 miles away. She was tired of the pretending. She wanted to put Sarah Johnson on her office door in big gold letters. We agreed that in 2 more weeks, everything would change. My contract would end. We could go public. Sarah could stop being the ice queen and just be Emma's stepmom. We could finally be a normal family. Linda from HR called me Tuesday morning requesting a meeting at 2 p.m. I was on-site inspecting foundation work when my phone buzzed with her message. Sarah had predicted this would happen. Sterling had gotten impatient and gone to HR himself with a recording of me accepting his bet. When I arrived at the HR conference room, Sterling was already there looking smug and confident. He thought he was about to watch me get fired. Linda sat at the head of the table with a neutral expression. She thanked us both for coming and said she'd received concerning information about my conduct with Ms. Feliz. I asked what conduct she meant. Sterling leaned forward and told me not to play dumb. He said he had me on recording accepting a bet to sleep with a company executive. He claimed this was sexual harassment and a violation of contractor ethics policy. He slid his phone across the table, and Linda played the recording. I watched myself accept Sterling's $20,000 dare. When the recording finished, Linda asked if I had anything to say about it. I said yes and pulled out my own phone. I told her I wanted to submit evidence of Sterling's attempt to engineer a policy violation for personal gain. Sterling's confidence flickered. I played my recording, the one that included Sterling explaining the bet, mentioning other female executives he'd targeted, and explicitly stating he wanted to knock Sarah Feliz down a peg. The room went completely silent. I continued talking and said I wanted to submit documentation of my relationship with Ms. Feliz, which had been disclosed to the company's legal department in January according to conflict of interest policies. Sterling's face went white. He said, "What?" Like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Linda's expression never changed. She thanked me and said she needed to verify the documentation with legal. She told me to wait outside. I left Sterling sitting there and went to the waiting area. 10 minutes later, Sarah arrived still in her meeting suit, looking every inch like the Ice Queen. She sat down next to me without speaking. We'd agreed not to talk where cameras might record us. 20 minutes passed. Then Linda opened the conference room door and called us both back in. She told Sterling he could leave. Sterling left, and I saw real fear in his eyes for the first time. Linda waited until the door closed, then told us she confirmed with legal that we'd submitted a conflict of interest disclosure and relationship documentation in January. Everything was properly filed. Linda asked how long we'd been married. I told her 13 months. I explained that we got married last May. I was hired as a contractor in June, and we disclosed everything the moment we realized my contract might create a reporting conflict. Linda asked if we'd maintained professional boundaries in the workplace. Sarah confirmed that we didn't arrive together, didn't interact beyond what was necessary for project coordination, and never allowed our relationship to influence business decisions. Linda told us that Sterling was being terminated immediately for creating a hostile work environment and attempting to manipulate company policy. This was the 5th such incident they'd documented. The evidence we'd provided would be included in the formal investigation. However, Linda said there was still an elephant in the room. Sarah was a VP of development, and I was a lead inspector. Even with proper disclosure, this created complications. I reminded her that my contract ended in 12 days, and after that there would be no professional conflict. Linda agreed and said that after June 30th, we were free to go public with our relationship without any policy concerns. Until then, she recommended we maintain our current boundaries. Sarah and I both agreed. We left HR separately to maintain appearances. But that night, Sarah came to my house instead of me go to her office. Emma was at a friend's house for a sleepover, so we had the place to ourselves. Sarah kicked off her heels and told me that Sterling was filing a wrongful termination suit. Legal had called her on the way over. Sterling claimed we'd entrapped him. I asked if we had. Sarah said no. Entrapment requires coercion, and Sterling had approached me voluntarily. I'd simply documented his misconduct. That was called evidence collection, not entrapment. I pulled Sarah onto the couch and said, 12 more days. She repeated it back to me like a promise. 12 more days, and she could introduce me as her husband at the company barbecue. 12 more days, and we could hold hands in the Morrison and Hale parking lot. 12 more days, and she could stop being the ice queen. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My father said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers. But I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show him that these tales matter. Please subscribe to my channel, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. Now, let's continue. The news about Sterling's termination spread through the company within hours. By Wednesday morning, everyone knew he'd been fired for ethics violations. The rumor mill went into overdrive. People said Sterling had been caught embezzling. Others said he'd falsified inspection reports. Nobody knew the real reason except me, Sarah, Linda in HR, and the legal team. I continued working my final days as lead site inspector. The crew treated me the same as always. They had no idea I was married to one of the executives. I inspected foundations, filed reports, and kept my muddy boots away from the executive floor. Sarah continued running her department with the same cold efficiency everyone expected from the Ice Queen. She attended meetings, approved projects, and never smiled in the hallways. Nobody suspected that she went home every night to a husband and a 12-year-old stepdaughter. Emma was excited about the end of my contract. She'd been keeping our secret for a year, which was a long time for a kid. She wanted to tell her friends that her stepmom worked downtown in a big glass building. She wanted Sarah to come to school events without pretending to be just Dad's friend. She wanted to be a normal family. On Thursday, Sarah had to attend a site inspection at the retail complex where I was working. It was the first time we'd been in the same location during work hours in months. I watched her arrive in her company car, wearing a gray suit and heels that weren't meant for construction sites. She walked past me without making eye contact, and I called her Ms. Feliz, like I always did. The inspection lasted 2 hours. Sarah asked technical questions about foundation strength and drainage systems. I answered professionally, calling her Ms. Feliz. Every time I spoke to her, the crew watched us interact with complete indifference, just another contractor talking to another executive. But inside, I was counting down the hours. 6 more days until my contract ended. 6 more days until I could call her Sarah in public. 6 more days until she could smile at me in front of other people. After the inspection, Sarah returned to her car and drove away without saying goodbye. That was part of the act we'd been performing for a year. But that night, she came to my house for dinner. Emma had made pasta. She was getting good at cooking, and we ate together like a real family. Sarah helped Emma with math homework while I did the dishes. Nobody watching through our windows would ever guess that Sarah was a high-powered executive. She looked like any other mom helping her kid with algebra. Emma asked how many more days until we could stop pretending. I told her 6. She asked if Sarah was going to move in with us, or if we were moving to Sarah's condo. Sarah said we hadn't decided yet, but probably we'd sell her condo, and she'd move into our house, because Emma's school was nearby, and it made more sense. Emma grinned, and said Sarah's condo was too small anyway. Sarah laughed, really laughed, not the fake polite laugh she used at work, and agreed that our house was better. It had a backyard and Emma's room, and all of Emma's stuff. Sarah's condo was just a place she'd been sleeping during the week to maintain the illusion that she lived alone. On Friday, I signed my final inspection reports. My contract officially ended the following Friday, but the real work was done. I completed every project Morrison and Hale had hired me for. The retail complex was finished. The foundation work was solid. Everything was documented properly. I went to Sarah's office one last time during work hours. I knocked twice and she told me come in. I closed the door and said, "One more week?" She smiled, the real smile, not the Ice Queen smile, and said, "One more week." We reviewed the plan for following Friday. My contract would officially end at 5 p.m. Linda in HR would send a company-wide email announcing that contractor Paul Johnson had completed his assignment. 30 minutes later, Sarah would send her own email introducing her husband, Paul Johnson, to the company. We'd calculated the timing carefully to make it clear that our relationship only became public after professional conflict ended. Sarah was nervous about the email. She said people would be shocked that the Ice Queen had a husband. They'd wonder how long we'd been married and why we kept it secret. Some people might feel betrayed that we hadn't told them. I reminded her that we'd followed every rule. We'd disclosed our relationship properly. We'd maintained professional boundaries. We had nothing to apologize for. Sarah agreed, but she was still worried about the reaction. She'd built her reputation as the Ice Queen, cold, efficient, married to her job. Now she'd be introducing herself as Paul Johnson's wife and Emma's stepmom. It was a big change. I told her that Emma was planning to bring homemade cookies to the office on Monday after my contract ended. She wanted to meet everyone and show them pictures of our family. Sarah laughed and said that sounded perfect. Nothing destroyed the Ice Queen image faster than a 12-year-old with cookies and family photos. Friday arrived, my last official day as a Morrison & Hale contractor. I spent the morning finishing paperwork and turning in my security badge and equipment. The crew threw me a small goodbye party in the site trailer. Pizza and soda and jokes about all the projects we completed together. Nobody knew they were also celebrating the end of my secret marriage. At 4 p.m., I cleaned out my desk and said my final goodbyes. At 5 p.m. exactly, my contract officially ended. I was no longer a Morrison & Hale employee. The professional conflict was over. I drove home and Emma was waiting with the outfit she'd picked out for me, dark jeans and a button-down shirt. She said I couldn't go to Sarah's office looking like a contractor anymore because now I was just Sarah's husband. I changed clothes while Emma talked nonstop about the email Sarah was about to send. At 5:30, Sarah sent the company-wide message. The subject line was simple: personal announcement. The body of the email was even simpler. I'm writing to introduce you to my husband, Paul Johnson, who completed his contract with Morrison & Hale today. Paul and I have been married for 13 months. We disclosed our relationship to HR and legal in January and maintained appropriate professional boundaries throughout his contract. We look forward to attending future company events together as a couple. Best regards, Sarah Felice Johnson. Sarah told me later that her inbox exploded within minutes. People sent congratulations in shock and questions. Her assistant sent 7 messages in a row, each one more confused than the last. The CEO sent a brief congratulation. Linda from HR sent a thumbs-up emoji. At 6 p.m., I arrived at Morrison & Hale with Emma. We took the elevator to the 17th floor. Sarah's assistant was still there, staring at her computer screen like she couldn't believe what she'd read. When she saw me and Emma, her mouth fell open. "You're Paul Johnson?" she said. "That's me," I confirmed. "And you're married to Miss Felice?" "For 13 months. Sarah's assistant looked at Emma. Emma waved and said, "I'm Emma. Sarah's my stepmom." Sarah's door opened and she stood there in her work clothes. But she was smiling. The real smile, not the Ice Queen smile. She looked at me and Emma and said, "Ready to go home?" I took her hand right there in front of her assistant. Sarah squeezed my fingers and we walked to the elevator together, me, Sarah, and Emma, a real family that didn't have to hide anymore. On Monday, Emma brought cookies to the office like she promised. We spent the morning meeting Sarah's colleagues and showing them family photos. People were shocked, amused, and mostly happy for us. A few seemed uncomfortable that we'd kept such a big secret, but most understood why we'd waited. The best moment came when Sarah's assistant asked Emma what it was like having the Ice Queen as a stepmom. Emma looked confused and said, "Ice Queen? Sarah's not an Ice Queen. She's just Mom." Sarah's assistant stared at Sarah like she was seeing her for the first time, and maybe she was Because Sarah wasn't the Ice Queen anymore. She was just Sarah Johnson, standing in her office with her husband and her daughter, eating homemade cookies and showing off family photos like any normal person. Sterling's wrongful termination lawsuit was dismissed 3 weeks later. The evidence against him was overwhelming. He'd targeted multiple contractors, created a hostile work environment, and attempted to manipulate company policy for personal gain. The company's legal team destroyed his case in less than an hour. I found new work easily. My reputation as a site inspector was excellent, and now I didn't have to hide my marriage to Sarah. Emma started listing Sarah as her emergency contact at school. Sarah moved into our house, and we sold her downtown condo. We became a normal family that didn't have to pretend anymore. The Ice Queen was gone. In her place was Sarah Johnson, wife and stepmom, who still ran her department with cold efficiency, but went home every night to a husband and daughter who knew the real woman behind the reputation. And that woman was so much better than the Ice Queen had ever been. This story teaches us that integrity and patience are more powerful than deception. Paul and Sarah could have exposed Sterling immediately, but they waited, documented everything, and followed proper procedures. They proved that doing things the right way, disclosing their relationship, maintaining professional boundaries, and building a solid case protects you better than any shortcut. When someone tries to trap you with unethical schemes, the best defense isn't retaliation, but a paper trail of your own honesty. Their success came from playing the long game, trusting the system they'd properly engage with, and refusing to compromise their values even when secrecy was hard. Real power isn't a manipulation. It's an integrity that can withstand any investigation. So here's the real question. Did you subscribe yet? Thousands of people will listen to this story and won't subscribe. Please don't be that person. Kindly support what I do here by subscribing. And then drop in the comment section if you like part 2 of Paul, Sarah, and Emma's story. What challenges will they face now that their secret is public? How will Sarah balance her Ice Queen reputation with being a wife and stepmom? Will Sterling's lawsuit create new problems for their family? Let me know if you want to hear more.